Good morning, everyone. My name is Shannon Millsaps, Operations Manager at Thrive Regional Partnership. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Thrive's Virtual Freight Forum, National Economic Partnership in Action. To kick things off, we'll share a short video about our transportation and freight mobility work, as well as a word from our presenting sponsor, McKee Foods. Following those, we'll be joined by Hamilton County Mayor Jim Coppinger. Please note the quality of video playback may be diminished based on your internet connectivity and the type of device you're using today. High resolution versions of each video shown today will be included in a follow-up email along with the recording of today's session.
Freight Alley. This region starts at the southeastern edge of the country and winds its way between 5 states through a network of highways, rivers, and rails. Home to the second largest cargo airport in the world and 2 of the largest global transportation companies, Freight Alley businesses and city and state organizations are responsible for the movement of goods across our region and country. With a population of 37 million people across the 5 states that make up Freight Alley, 1.25 million work in transportation, and the gross regional product comes in at a cool $1.75 trillion. The transportation industry affects our livelihoods, our access to goods, the health of the environment, and so much more. It's no exaggeration to say it affects every household in the region, and the Chattanooga region is nestled right in the center of the action.
Freight impacts every aspect of our lives. How we handle freight moving through this region, the decisions we make today impact our communities, impact the natural treasures. We must think strategically and long-term about the freight. This region is Freight Alley.
At Thrive Regional Partnership, we're dedicated to inspiring responsible growth in our region through conversation, connection, and collaboration. Whether it's connecting stakeholders or collecting data to help make strategic decisions, Thrive takes a big picture look at the challenges affecting the region we call home. In 2018, we formed a Freight Mobility Coalition to drive the conversation toward addressing key freight challenges in the greater Chattanooga region. Our role as the convening body was an important one, as it brought together representatives from private logistics and manufacturing companies and public officials. Ultimately, these are the voices who influence public policy. Through collaboration from stakeholders in this sector, it became clear that issues like truck parking, freight flow, and congestion of our highways were and are issues that affect everyone in the region. Because of connections formed through the coalition, the Tennessee Department of Transportation was able to act quickly and effectively when a funding opportunity through the Federal Highway Administration came up. With 23 letters of support from Thrive's coalition partners, TDOT landed a federal grant for multi-jurisdictional coordination, one of only 4 awarded across the entire country. The money from this grant went on to fund research on truck parking and freight flow patterns, and support the ongoing partnership framework Thrive created. Through the Freight Mobility Coalition, we will continue this important conversation. Freight is a regional challenge that requires regional solutions, and together we can keep doing the important work to address issues that are vital to our region.
We have a region that wants to collaborate, that wants to share, that wants to work together. We have discovered that there are so many partners that really think regionally, and Thrive's role is convening these folks that want to work together and that have information and have a common goal of let's grow together, let's grow smartly, let's share as much information with each other as we can.
Together, we're imagining the future of freight mobility.
And now a word from our presenting sponsor, McKee Foods.
It started a long, long time ago. Little Debbie's granddad woke up and said, I think I'll make the world a treat. Fresh from the oven, something sweet. The face of Little Debbie will go with each one. As my granddaughter's the vision of freshness and fun. And through the years and generations, we've served up smiles and innovations. Oatmeal cream pies, Swiss rolls galore, zebra cakes, Nutty Buddy, honey bun, and more. We make them and whoosh, they rush to your store. for the smiles they bring you and the difference that makes. That's the reason this family bakery does what it takes. And each morning when we awake, we look in the mirror. Today, we bake.
Good morning and welcome to Thrive Regional Partnerships Virtual Freight Forum, National Economic Partnership in Action. My name is Deborah Ann Stone and I'm the Logistics Cost Analyst for McKee Foods Corporation here in beautiful Collegedale, Tennessee. McKee Foods has long recognized the value of our region's natural treasures in attracting and retaining top employees. The quality of life is important to a thriving community. This pandemic has emphasized the need for improved broadband access so that our employees who live in remote areas of our region can connect with each other. From our corporate headquarters here in Collegedale, and for the time being virtually from home, our planning and order fulfillment department plans shipments of delicious Little Debbie, Sunbelt, and Drake's snacks that deliver to all of North America. A safe, efficient, and congestion-free network of highways and interstates is vital to our ability to deliver to our customers. This region, our home, sits at the heart of a bustling mega region we call Freight Alley. Chattanooga has 2 of the top 100 interstate bottlenecks in the entire United States, and we must work together to find solutions for key challenges like truck parking, congestion, and crumbling infrastructure. That's why I serve as the chair of Thrive's Freight Mobility Coalition. We want to preserve the things we love about this 16-county, 3-state region while we update our infrastructure to meet the transportation needs of the future. Thrive's collaborative, cross-sector approach connects private businesses with government planning agencies and elected officials to provide a vision of the roads that my grandchildren will drive upon. Thank you for joining me today as we celebrate our successes and plan our next steps.
Thank you, Deborah. It's an honor to have the Mayor of Hamilton County, Jim Coppinger, here with us this morning to make some opening remarks. Mayor Coppinger, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you. And gosh, what an honor it is to be here with you today. And just want to say good morning to all of our participants and people that are watching this streaming. And on behalf of Hamilton County, welcome you to our region's first virtual freight forum. This is a tremendous opportunity for us to come together, for us to be able to exchange ideas and concepts about what can be done for the movement of freight, not only today, but in the years to come. A lot of work has been done to be able to receive this Federal Highway Administration freight, partnership grant. So allow me, first of all, to thank all of our partners across the tri-state region, again, including 16 counties and 3 states, both public and private sector, for their engagement and involvement, and for not only expressing their challenges with the freight movement, but for also rolling up their sleeves and helping us get to work to solve some of these really important issues that we have as it relates to moving freight. To all of our 60 volunteers that have invested more than 250 hours, please accept our thanks. It could not have happened without the volunteers that were willing to do this hard work. And to all of our government entities that were involved in this effort, both state, or I should say state, local, and our counties, that have a great appreciation to all of you for your involvement as well. And of course, to our own Hamilton County McKee Foods, a very special thank you for this, in support of this, of being able to be the sponsor for this particular event. I can't say how many times that I've reached out to McKee Food here in Hamilton County, and I know some of you have throughout the region. They've always stepped up. A special thank you to our chair of Thrive, Connie Vaughn, who just happens to be an employee there. But again, for all of her involvement and all the help that we've received from her for many, many years. And to our, we also want to give thanks to our TDOT for them realizing the value of Thrive, this regional platform and vision that Thrive has, and for them taking the time to be involved and to get engaged and turning some of what they've seen through their engagement into some concrete funding, which will benefit the entire greater Hamilton County tri-state region, and for administering the grant of the Federal Highway Administration Freight Partnership Grant. We want to say on behalf of all of the 3 states and the transportation departments, thank you to TDOT for stepping up. As we all know, our geographic location is centralized in the hub of this freight alley, which is a win for us economically, but is a real challenge logistically. That's why it's so important that we all continue to collaborate and work together going forward, and why it's so important for this event that is occurring today. As you well know, freight has no jurisdictional lines, and that's why it's been so important to have this collaboration and cooperation from the 16 counties and the 3 states that's been mentioned. And this is why we have come together on multiple times across these jurisdictional lines in an effort to make positive things happen as we all continue to benefit from the economic growth that we're experiencing. And what we know together, our region will continue to advance at a much faster pace because of Thrive's hard work and because of the volunteer leadership that many of you today have contributed to this particular cause. This doesn't happen on its own, and it doesn't happen overnight. We've come a long way, but there's a long way to go, which is why I know that the spirit of cooperation that got us here together to achieve this federal grant will hold us together as we face the challenges that we have with the freight mobility. So I look forward to hearing about the exchanges of ideas and the concepts and solutions today. And on behalf of Hamilton County and our sponsor of McKee Foods, welcome to today's Regional Freight Forum. Thank you for working together with all of us to ensure that the infrastructure required of a thriving economy will continue to move and continue to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Coppinger, for those remarks. I certainly echo your statements of appreciation to all of our partners. It takes not a village, but it takes a region. And I have to say, as we have tackled these issues in such an unprecedented way, we are so grateful, Mayor Coppinger, for your leadership and your solid support in this work. As you all just heard, this bold approach is indeed successfully moving our region forward. And how we're doing that, how this now national economic partnership is actually in action, is what I'm going to introduce you all to now, followed by our leads at TDOT and CDM Smith that you'll hear from after me, and then ending with a word from our chair, Connie Vaughn. We now know better that we live, work, and play in a very robust, extraordinarily strong freight-dependent economy. And we know that freight knows no boundaries. The question that Thrive has been working to uncover and pull together is if freight knows no boundaries, why are we planning the infrastructure for Freight Alley siloed within those boundaries? With full understanding of the enormous tasks each of these individual planning entities have within their own individual footprints, this intangible conversation has now brought our region together with each other, tangibly working interdependently together to move Freight Alley forward. So why does all of this matter, and what does it mean for us locally, especially to an organization like Thrive? focusing on inspiring responsible growth throughout the greater Chattanooga region. As this map indicates, it is an indisputable fact that we are the heart of Freight Alley with significant freight flows. Unfortunately, we know all too well about the funding shortfalls that our region faces in keeping up with the needs of an increasingly crumbling infrastructure as we continue to grow and use that infrastructure. Because of the convergence of the interstate systems that you see here on this map, we do know that a single accident along this corridor can cause significant delays for our companies, our employees, our residents, and travelers alike in all directions. In order to sustain and support the economy that our businesses and industries are creating, we now work together, connecting the dots, we like to say that, with our DOTs and the MPOs, tying our region's transportation planning professionals together to address these and other negative ramifications of growth pressures that are hurting the flow of freight through our region today. So to help articulate the significance of this, let me just run a few numbers by you of what that freight flow looks like here in our region. In 2019, we saw record-setting numbers coming out of the Port of Savannah in that year. And if you wonder where those containers go, I would invite you to just look around as you travel along the interstates of our region. We also know that the vast majority of the freight funneling into that single corridor doesn't stop or originate here in this region. We know that freight doesn't move on trucks alone. It travels by barge on the river, rail, air, and roads. And we know that the projections over the next 15 years are gaining speed with 33 million tons of freight projected to flow through our region annually by 2035. I want to point out a statement that comes from Thrive's original findings 7 years ago. It says, historically, growth in the region has been driven by the availability of infrastructure and market demand, even though approaches to infrastructure provisions are fragmented and vary significantly. This was kind of a awakening moment for us. But what does that mean? So when you look at the part about the growth in the region, that growth is evidenced by the vast amount of manufacturing and industry that have located along the infrastructure corridor, one that I believe we credit to FreightWaves as calling and tagging it as Freight Alley. Additionally, just this week, you haven't seen, Inc. magazine released its 5,000 fastest growing private companies in the nation. And it comes as no surprise to us that trucking and logistics companies dominated the Chattanooga companies that were included in that list. However, the fragmented approach that the Trends and Forces report pointed out, planning around that same Freight Alley is evidenced here. Over the course of the past few years, we have engaged 21 public planning entities as partners around this topic, along with dozens of private industry stakeholders. In fact, that includes partners from the mega region that you see here, Birmingham, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia, Nashville, Tennessee, and Savannah, Georgia, that isn't even on this map here. But Thrive continues to set the table for these partners to convene, just as we did before. After the National Economic Partnership Study is completed, we will continue to convene these partners because our action behind the NEP study is just now getting started. And speaking of Savannah, our partners from the Georgia Ports Authority have been and continue to be deeply involved in this conversation, and we are grateful for that. Even before their Appalachian Regional Port Facility entered our region in Murray County. So Ryan McDonald, Strategic Operations and Planning Manager, said there is great value in taking the regional approach that Thrive has taken. It is a more complete way to address and help solve regional challenges. As part of TDOT's freight movement along Freight Alley, the Greater Chattanooga Region study that you'll hear more about from Dan Palmia and Melissa Ziegler, Thrive's role was to reach out to the private sector industry, relying on moving their parts, their products through our region. We engage dozens of freight partners to gather qualitative data on key freight issues and needs. And when I say qualitative, I mean, we wanted the companies that you're going to see here on this list. This is how we ensure the highest quality in the responses by identifying these 6 categories of freight industry stakeholders to survey regarding the movement of goods through the greater Chattanooga and Piedmont Atlantic mega region. So you'll see these categories here. Private fleet. So when we say private fleet, just to give you an example, this is companies like McKee Foods, Engineered Floors, Shaw Industries, for example. These are companies that have their own private fleet. So you may see them out on the interstate and you'll see the big truck that has their logo on the side. Those are private fleet. But then there's also truckload. So when you see a Covenant Transportation truck or a US Express, they aren't carrying their own goods, they're carrying someone else's. Then there's less than truckload. This is FedEx, UPS, Delta Delivers. These are our partners that are moving the shipments throughout as well on a less than truckload. There's third-party logistics. This includes things like Tranco Logistics, Arrive Logistics, Intermodal, Stakeholder and then we go to the intermodal, which is like the Appalachian Regional Port, Chattanooga Airport, Ingram Barge. Those are things that move it from one mode to the other. And then there's stakeholder manufacturers. So these are the Volkswagens, Amazon, Lodge, Wacker, companies in the region that do not have their own fleet, but are dependent on moving those. And I thank our chair, Deborah Stone, for that, because it was an excellent way to help me understand better the significance in what we are moving and how we are moving it. We asked these stakeholders, what do you see as the 3 largest issues and challenges affecting freight movement in the greater Chattanooga region? And you see here what the top 3 are. With 72% of road highways, 51% said truck parking, and 46% said infrastructure deterioration. And then we asked how often they or their customers move freight through the I-75, I-24, I-59 corridor of the greater Chattanooga region. And you'll see here that 92% said that they move their freight through the corridor, through the entire corridor. Why is this interesting? Because nobody, 0 respondents said they only travel I-75 alone. So I find that so compelling of how our entire infrastructure works together. And then we asked the truck drivers that were engaged in this survey, how many of them need truck parking on a regular basis? And 77% said they needed truck parking on a regular basis as they traveled through this region. And the majority of those respondents says it takes more than an hour to find truck parking in the greater Chattanooga region. But let me just pause right here on this visual. As I said earlier, this was new to me. It may be new to you that are joining us today. In this visual here, you see trucks that are parked on the shoulder illegally because they have no option. They're required by federal government regulations to stop driving after 10 hours of service for the safety of themselves and everyone else on the road. It doesn't matter if there's a parking spot available for them or not. They must stop driving that huge truck. What our freight partners are telling us is it is a struggle to find safe, legal parking within those hours of service requirements. So when unexpected congestion or a single accident delays the best, most professionally laid plans to legally park somewhere, doesn't matter any longer. And how do they try to find parking? So we asked them, how do you usually plan to find truck parking? And this chart here says that 43% said they find the nearest parking within their hours of service limit. So they're just looking for it when they hit that time limit. The next highest response was, I always park in the same place if you have that luxury, or I use internet or smartphone apps. And lastly, I call travel centers to ask about availability. Something that stuck out most to us is this. 50% of the participating drivers said a regional vision for freight transportation is one of the greatest strengths of the current freight transportation system in the greater Chattanooga region. I would venture to guess that the other 50% just aren't aware that we're doing this. Most don't, but I have no doubt they're crying out for this. It wasn't always this way. So I encourage us all to continue working together to keep it this way.
Thank you so much, Bridget. This time I'd like to welcome Dan Palmy, Freight and Logistics Director of TDOT.
So what I'd like to do is take a little bit different spin and kind of explain the Federal Highway National Economic Partnership. It's great, the comments from the mayor and the comments from Bridget kind of really tie into that. But why is it important for this? What the National Economic Partnership really did is it looks at it from a mega regional concept. And I think that's so critical. And when Melissa talks with CDM Smith, and you'll see some of the recommendations and some of the work that they've done, it really looks at freight flows and how what people really don't understand is it's a mega regional concept. What really helps the Chattanooga area, helps Alabama, it helps Georgia, it helps Tennessee. And some of the data that they'll show that, of course, this project's going to be coming to an end here at the end of the year. And it's in draft form right now. So it's a shame this forum's about 2 months too early, but it certainly is going to be a great product that I think is going to be very interesting for the group. As the mayor said, and Bridget, freight knows no boundaries. And I think that's hard for a DOT to get around. And so you really have to look at it from that concept and go from it, but it really is a mega regional concept. One thing, for example, if you could sit there and look at on that slide that Bridget said that was from Freightways, it's a great slide. They do wonderful work, but if you look at that slide and you look at, for example, the automobile suppliers, and they're really located in all three of those states, and Agri-Wood is located in all three of those states. So it really does have an impact to all the states and all the people part of it. Another thing I want to point out is, and the next slide, please, Shannon. So here's the 4 projects that were awarded. Obviously, the future freight movement along Freight Alley, and I really think this is a beginning of a much bigger project. So let's say we understand the freight flows for the automobile sector, but what happens when the convergence of electric vehicles come in? That's a totally different supply chain mode. So the beauty of that video that was showed in there is it really does show the right freight on the right mode at the right time. If you look at it from that perspective, it had I always talk about the 4 R's: road, river, rail, runway. And what the assets are of this freight corridor is exactly that. You can move your shipment via barge if you wanted to, due to the great water infrastructure, or rail due to the class 1s that operate in the 3 states. The Port of Savannah goes straight to the Port of Savannah and rail it into some of the Chatsworth and the other ports, bypassing the need for trucks on the road. And I think that's an important part and an extremely critical benefit of our region. So these 4 were awarded by Federal Highway. A status of it is that we're in draft form of the, and you're going to hear more about it from Melissa here shortly. We're in draft form now. We're going to finish this at the end of the year. But I also want to talk about a little more detail that Bridget. The nice thing is we've had about 3 reviews on how the flow of this is going. So every single time I think we all change what we're going to talk about a little bit, probably is driving Shannon a little nuts. But I'll go in a little bit more detail on truck parking and some of the things that we're doing, not only as a part of this project, but what I ensure is a vision to reduce that time spent that the truckers are looking for a spot, to reduce that time spent of a system that will really tell the truckers where available parking spots are, or at least to a good proportion of where they could. And finally, the comments that I want to say is that, the partnership with Thrive is really what the public needs. We need more of that to really understand, engage the community. It doesn't matter what I think. I have a close relationship, and I saw he's on the call right now with Dave Hunter-Yeager with the Tennessee Trucking Association, but it's a lot bigger than that. We need to keep everybody engaged in partnerships like this that truly foster collaboration, communication is really better for not only everyone in the Chattanooga region, but every single one of those 16 counties, and then even bigger from a mega regional concept, which was the whole intent of the National Economic Partnership. And I'm just glad that we have the partners to move forward this, and looking forward to what we do. And we don't put this on a shelf, but we use this as a guide to continually to grow that business, to continually grow infrastructure and the issues that we have in the region, to make, at the end of the day, it's all about economics, right? If it employs people, it employs jobs, and it betters nothing but the region, the state, and the states around us. So those are my comments, and I'll give it back to Shannon.
And thank you so much. At this time, as Dan said, I'd like to welcome Melissa Ziegler, the Senior Planner for CDM Smith, a consultant that's been doing a lot of the gathering and reporting out in this process. Melissa.
Thanks, Shannon. We can go to the next slide. I think you've heard it a couple of times this morning, actually the next slide also. Fostering economic prosperity and finding better options for moving people and goods doesn't begin or end at a city or state boundary. And sometimes we forget that. This map shows the 2040 peak hour congestion projections for high truck volume corridors on the national highway system. And it makes a strong case for mega regional and multi-jurisdictional collaboration and partnership. I really think of this map as a map of our economy in motion and the highway linkages between states and regions that support that economy. And as Dan said just a few minutes ago, it is an interconnected system, a multimodal system, and we all rely on other regions and other states to make our economy as successful as it is. Next slide. The outline shown on this map, the little frame box, encompasses an area that we're calling the Freight Alley Core Region, which includes 58 counties in 3 states. And the Thrive Partnership Region is at the center of this region. Today, these 58 counties are home to 8.5 million people. By 2040, 10.6 million people will call this region home. So keep that population growth and that population volume in mind as we look through a couple of other slides from our research and analysis through this study. Next slide. This map shows the interstate corridors that are projected to have heavy truck volumes by 2040. So to calculate truck flows, we evaluate the corridor traffic volumes and the number of trucks on the corridor. We're usually looking at 10% or greater truck volume for a corridor to be classified as a heavy truck volume corridor. I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone on this webinar, the projected truck volumes on the interstates in this region over the next 20 years. It is increasing significantly, and many of these segments have much higher than 10% truck volume. Taking that in context with the map on the next slide, the corridor segments on this map shown in yellow are already classified as heavily congested corridors. The segments shown in red are expected to be heavily congested corridors by 2040. So you think about congestion on these corridors today as you drive these interstates, and then look at this map again. Can you imagine what the drive from Chattanooga to Atlanta may be like in 2040 without intervening changes and improvements, which will occur, but it does make you stop and think. So what does this congestion and the heavy truck volumes mean for the future of business and industry and the economic competitiveness of the Freight Alley region? Next slide. Because of the freight focus of this study, we selected in partnership with TDOT 5 freight dependent industry clusters for analysis. These are cluster manufacturing businesses that we looked at specifically in aerospace and aviation, ag production and food, automotive manufacturing, wood flooring and forest products, and also included trucking and logistics. These cluster manufacturing locations are freight generators where raw materials, parts, component assembly, and finished goods are shipped inbound and outbound to the next point on the supply chain. The cluster manufacturing locations that are shown on the cluster maps you'll see in just a second don't include facilities and workers that are engaged in cluster research and development, maintenance and repair businesses, supply systems, or other related businesses. And I think it's really important to recognize that manufacturing and these manufacturing businesses drive the demand for broader direct and indirect employment within the cluster and within the region, creating additional economic benefits and supporting the region's economic competitiveness. According to a recent study by the National Association of Manufacturers, manufacturing drives 75% of all private sector research and development. And that may be the reason why you see some of the nation's premier research facilities related to these 5 industry clusters actually within this Freight Alley core region. I know all of us recognize that COVID-19 has had some significant impacts on our life. We're joining each other virtually today rather than in person because of that. It really is impossible to predict the long-term impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on these 5 industry clusters or other sectors in the region. But one thing that has been evident in the analysis of these 5 sectors and reading more recent research from industry analysts, the pandemic will affect each of these clusters differently. But long-term, most of the research indicates that these clusters will rebound to levels perhaps even better than what we saw at the close of 2019. In the interest of time today, we're going to look at only 2 of the industry cluster maps. As you look at these 2 industry cluster maps, I think the powerful linkage between freight transportation corridors and the region's economy becomes very evident. The map we're looking at right now shows the automotive assembly manufacturers with more than 1,000 employees at a single location and automotive supplier manufacturers with more than 300 employees at a single location. There are a lot of factors that are crucial to locating, expanding, and the ongoing operation of automotive manufacturing. But it's pretty clear when you look at this map that the proximity and access to interstate corridors is very high on that list. And think about this, in the southeastern United States, there are 15 automotive supply plants, and the Freight Alley region is within a day's drive of another 9 automotive manufacturing facilities. That integrated automotive manufacturing and the multimodal transportation networks serving this region really helps to explain in important and powerful ways the strong growth in the automotive cluster in this region. Next slide. Nationally, overall freight tonnage is projected to grow from 16 billion tons in 2019 to nearly 21 billion tons by 2030, an increase of over 25%. The trucking share of freight tonnage is close to 70%. This map shows the locations of trucking and logistics operations with 300 or more employees within the Freight Alley core region. And not surprising, these are concentrated around urban areas and near interstate corridors. But was mentioned earlier, also in this region, you have significant private investment, including 3 of the nation's top 25 truckload carriers and 4 of the top 100 private carriers have located their headquarters facilities here. Next slide. Someone mentioned a little earlier about inaction, and recommendations were really an important part of this study. That's sort of where the pedal hits the metal. The Thrive Freight Mobility Committee really played an integral role in this study and in the development and evaluation of recommendations. I want to say again, in my experience working with this group, this is really an inspirational group of public and private sector leaders who work together to address freight challenges, educate the broader community about the importance of freight to the region's economic competitiveness, and they're keenly focused on providing a collaborative public and private platform for improving freight and transportation operation. I also wanted to mention to the larger group on the webinar, your comments today, along with the input from three Thrive Freight Mobility Committee meetings that have been a part of this study, will be incorporated in the final report. So I want to highlight just a couple of recommendations. The first on this page has to do with pursuing strategic opportunities to build stronger multi-jurisdictional collaborative partnerships. There are some great examples of best practices, including the Thrive Regional Partnership, the Eastern Transportation Coalition, which some of you may know as the I-95 Corridor Coalition, as it was previously named. But we see those best practices and opportunities to continue to integrate and strengthen multimodal collaborations, multi-jurisdictional collaborations as being really important. One of the things Dan Palmy mentioned in a conversation last week was the importance of identifying state laws that impact the deployment of transportation technologies. It's important to align technologies with state and local laws to progress technology applications. And I think as a recommendation, it's an important element to start looking at those state laws and the deployment of technology. One other recommendation, we think evaluating transportation technologies such as driver-assisted truck platooning, active traffic management, integrated intelligent transportation systems could provide some near-term improvements for freight movement on freight alley corridors. Also, there are opportunities to evaluate funding options for future multi-jurisdictional proposals to deploy these technologies. Next slide. Several times the truck parking issue has been mentioned as a part of this study. We've developed a truck parking inventory. We've learned from TDOT about a very exciting study that they're also involved in right now about truck parking that Dan will talk more about in just a minute. But we think there's an opportunity to utilize the truck parking inventory from this study, other recent regional truck parking studies, to create a mega regional supply and demand analysis of truck parking to confirm parking needs and evaluate options for leveraging private investments to address gaps. And finally, perhaps in the not too distant future, we'd recommend conducting a multi-state freight summit, hopefully face-to-face, and perhaps even with the opportunity to shake hands of old friends, to bring together DOTs, NPOs, freight and logistics businesses, and other stakeholders to identify and prioritize potential mega regional freight projects as a starting point for future pursuits, perhaps of joint funding opportunities to help fund these projects. I appreciate the opportunity to participate and be happy to address any questions when we get into our Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. We're going to transition now into a feedback discussion about truck parking and technology applications. I'll welcome Dan Palmy to introduce those topics. And as it says on your screen, if you'd like to weigh in at any point and speak, please just raise your virtual hand and I will unmute you. You can also use the chat box feature. Dan.
Thanks, Shane. I just raised my virtual hand in case anybody didn't get that. So Melissa alluded to a little bit. I think there's two different things going on that I think is important to the group. It's kind of funny going through this run through. We kind of changed the format of this a little bit because they thought this was interesting. So first of all, in the truck parking, as Melissa said, we've kind of labeled every spot, both public and private, in the trucking in the truck parking area. That's really the first step, right? You got to know what your inventory is, where it is, and what have you. In the meantime, we've also, at the same exact time as this National Economic Partnership, we actually have another research project going on that the Department of Transportation paid for. Now, this is strictly in the state of Tennessee because it was our own state funds that we used. But what it did, it was headed up by the University of Memphis with support, which is very interesting, I think, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, that both did. In years past, they were the experts in truck parking. So they've used through GPS data to really look at where truck parking is an issue at certain times of the day. They've actually created a website. The nice thing is all this is going to be released about the same time, but I think it's really critical to not only know, and the whole purpose of that, I guess, was to see if you have an area, and let's say it's 20 miles outside of Chattanooga, and that's not a problem where truck parking is. Well, we don't want to invest any money in potential expanding a welcome center, expanding a rest area, or even creating a new rest area. The same exact point is, what's the private industry doing? Just in the past month, I think there's 2 trucking travel centers that have been opened up at exit 126 and then on I-81 up in East Tennessee. Well, obviously, if there's a truck parking shortage there now and a minor truck parking shortage, we don't want to invest dollars, state dollars, into doing that. So very interesting. There's websites developed that they've done in this, so it'll all be real time. So that's one program that we're overlapping with the results of this truck parking survey. And we've had a map. We're fine tuning and tweaking it now, and that will be done. That map will be done at the same time by the end of next month. So a lot of these things are really fast moving. I didn't talk about this before, but I think it's important when I was giving credit to the feds on developing this national economic partnership and this mega region concept. But the timeline really was pretty quick from that perspective. It was awarded, I think, in May of 2019, and we will be finishing it up before December, the timeline in December. So looking forward to the results. So I talked a lot about truck parking. I think right now Shannon wanted to go into some questions about truck parking. If we want to go directly there.
If there's anyone in attendance that would like to either ask a question in the Q&A box or raise their hand to speak, I can unmute you. You can also use the chat feature if you'd like to weigh in on this truck parking discussion. Give that just a moment. Told Beth Jones may have a question.
Sure.
Beth, I'm going to unmute you.
Or I can answer it there, Shannon, if you want. She said, will the study dive into opportunities, additional smaller intermodal facilities along short lines throughout the region in an effort to get more trucks off the highways and onto rail? Beth, that's a great question. From the truck parking perspective, not really. It will, though, I will tell you, when we talk about all those different modes that Melissa talked about in the 5 businesses, those are the 5 strengths of the region. So obviously, if you have the capability of short line rail and for those of you, I'm sure everybody knows this, but just to recap, short lines really connect to the class 1s for the long haul movement of freight goods. So you have an intermodal that is basically container on rail. This could be much more bulk. And there's going to be another question that comes up in question and answer on talking about the Chickamauga lock, that I'll wait on that. But every time we have a benefit of an additional facility, it gives leverage to the tri-state area. And that's in the 16 counties of Thrive. That is important to really note. Rick Roden from Jackson County says they have an auto manufacturer with over 300 employees. All right, we'll have to update that on the thing. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, just a quick update. The list of those manufacturers and the number of employees was provided to the study by the statewide economic development agencies for for all three states. And I'm sure that they provided the most recent data that they had, but we'll certainly update that. Thanks, Rick.
Yes, thank you.
Deborah, you asked how many truck parking spaces are there in our region, public or private. I want to say there was over 1,000. It's right at 1,000 public parking spaces. I don't know if that it has included the new, the relatively new lot at exit 47, I think, on Highway 40 that's westbound. So I'm not 100% sure with that, but I will. We keep track of an Excel spreadsheet, and then with the other additional spots. And I want to point out, and this is an important classification from a safety perspective. You know, when we count parking spots, it's the ones that are lined in the parking lot. We do not the ones that are parallel parked, the ones that every time you pass a rest area that you see maybe on the on ramp or off ramp. From a safety perspective, we do not count those, and we do not want the drivers to park there. And I know that it does happen. We've actually done signage to do that. And the reason is for safety. Obviously the trucks take a longer time to de-accelerate and to accelerate. So it's really about the safety as they merge on and off the ramps to do that. So I think everybody shares that. So Beth.
Another question from Beth Jones.
Yeah. So how are we monitoring the private truck plazas and convenience centers? It's old fashioned. A lot of times, Beth, with today's technology, believe it or not, they get up in the sky, they look at satellites and they physically count them. It's we actually had one project that UTK headed that they physically drove in every parking lot and counted every spot. It's kind of interesting. You would think, and I'm sure that this is where the private meets the public, you would think that the travel centers have that information in spreadsheets like we do, but they weren't really willing to share that for the case of the study.
Yeah.
One of the exciting things about the truck parking segment of this study is the inventory that was done for truck parking areas included private truck plazas, convenience centers, as well as the state's parking facilities. And we were able to get great cooperation from the private providers of truck parking. It did take some effort and a lot of support from TDOT to do that, but now there is an inventory that has a pretty high percentage of the truck parking facilities and a lot of the underlying information about the amenities at these various facilities, in addition to the number of parking spaces, the things that they have available that are attractive to truckers themselves. So that's an added benefit, hopefully, of this study that all the states can use going forward.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Melissa. And I know we probably need to shift Shannon to the next talking about technology, but I did get a couple real quick questions that I can talk about. Dave Hunter Yeager asked to be in a private, what about the illegally parked spots that people, do we know how bad the number is? Dave, we did a study a few years ago. It's probably outdated, but I can get you that answer. I know that's probably important to you. Max asked, is there amenities? Yes, we did it by amenities. The truck parking map that we have will show that, Max, as you're going. And then Terry asked, what are the peak truck parking over capacity demand times and how long do they typically last? That's kind of an interesting question because some of them are breaks that are quicker when the drivers are taking their 30-minute breaks. The other part is when they're doing their rest, which is over 10 hours. So it's two different segments that we match, and GPS does give us that data. So, all right, you want me to switch
Dan?
to, I know, yes.
I'm sorry, I know we're bumping up against about 15 minutes left, but I know Beth Jones wanted to weigh in quickly. So Beth, if you're still with us.
I am. I was just going to say there may be some collaboration we can do with our planning staff as they staff these planning commissions. I think we get probably firsthand knowledge when there's another convenience center, another truck plaza coming online. I don't know if you're aware, there's one, a Petro that's now being proposed again for Mont Eagle. So perhaps we can just do a call to action to them to provide that feedback as it's occurring, to try to keep you all up to date, at least in the areas where we staff those planning commissions.
That's great.
Great point, Beth.
Thank you so much.
I'll talk to you more about that, Beth.
Okay.
If we can transition now over to tech applications.
Okay, in the essence of time, I'll try to keep this a little bit short, Shannon, but two things that kind of came up that Melissa, I think it was Melissa that said that I think that's very important. When we talk about tech applications, I think it's very important to realize the net effect. So, for example, platooning. When platooning came in the state a few years ago, it was illegal. It was illegal for two trucks to travel down the interstate at less than 300 feet. Well, the whole purpose of platooning, in case you don't know, is to keep trucks within 39 and I think 56 feet for the fuel savings of they're traveling down the road kind of like this. And with those fuel savings is a benefit of, to the trucking company goes through. So the first step that had to be done is we had to change state law. And so actually, if you want to platoon in the state, it actually comes to my staff and we look at it to make sure that they have systems in place. So they're just not tailgating, think of it that way, going down there. So when you start talking about technology, even though platooning, there are drivers in both trucks, by the way. But if you look at it from that perspective, just remember this, it's all about safety. Everything we do at DOT, and this is the same, whether it's Georgia or Alabama or any state, it's all about safety. And the great thing about what platooning gives you, it gives you collision mitigation systems. It gives you lane warning systems. It gives you different systems that are helping that driver be safer, which in turn is also helping the people that drive around him, him or her being safer as they operate. So the one thing I wanted to say is that it's up to the legislature first to change those state laws to make it. So a great example, really an opportunity right now for the state of Tennessee is you've all seen the future talking about robots delivering packages in the LTL world with the e-commerce boom. Well, the big issue there is, right, you can't have motor vehicles on the sidewalk. Well, they had to change state law to make an example for that. And the state legislature is smart enough to really sit there and say, we want to keep it so broad now, but then tighten it up as the future goes on, because they really don't know. And I know that FedEx is doing a pilot, I think, in Franklin, Tennessee, to talk about these when these robots come to a delivery near you, I guess. The interesting thing about that is, too, when you talk about public and private partnerships, is that legislation, that bill that was proposed this year in the state legislature that passed, was both a combination from Amazon and FedEx going in jointly to change that law. So it really is bigger than one company. And so I thought that was a very unique, and the group thought it would have been great to talk about that a little bit. I don't know if there were any questions on that.
I don't see any at this time, but if someone has a question or would like to weigh in on the chat box. If not, we do have a couple of questions that we can transition to here in a moment.
You know, maybe one thing for the group to consider as you think about the application of technologies along these corridors and some of the different concepts that we've talked about. If you've seen the deployment of technologies in other areas that you think have made a significant difference in the ability of freight traffic and traffic as a whole to move more expeditiously, I think it'd be great to share that experience and that knowledge with Thrive so that they're aware of where those are and the technologies that have been used.
That's a great point, Melissa. Thank you. As we wrap up here, just under 10 minutes to go, I want to get to a couple of questions that we do have. One from Craig Phillip. Is the partnership considering how to leverage the large investment being made by the Corps of Engineers at the Chickamauga Lock along the Tennessee River? Dan, can I pitch that one to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, Craig, great question. It seems like it's been years and years since this project's come through fruition and going to come in there. Anytime, Craig, we can put the right freight on the right mode at the right time is a boon for every single mode in the state and the region. We need to start talking about it now, in all honesty, when it does open up, is to really recruit. And this is where, economic development is so critical. Obviously, in this case, it's more the flow on the river, on the Tennessee River coming down from East Tennessee. But as you know, Craig, a lot of businesses have not relocated in that area. So it's kind of been an impact to those businesses. But we look at now to really engage our economic development partners to try to bring business to there so that they can start using that freight flows. And then what happens, I always say, and Craig, you and I have had this conversation, but I want all freight on pipeline. After pipeline, I want it on water. After water, I want it on rail. After rail, I want it on truck. And why is that? Because it's the safest and the lowest transportation cost, and it's the better for the whole region. Because what happens is truck is the easiest. Truck is where the majority of freight moves. Truck will always be around, but anytime it won't ever stifle growth. It won't ever stifle some of the congestion points that we have as we move. We just can't keep on building additional lanes and handling the freight that way. So thanks, Craig, for the question.
Thank you, everyone, so much. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our presenters today, everyone in attendance. I'll remind everyone that today's forum is being recorded, and we'll be sending out a follow-up email in the coming days. It will include a feedback survey with some space to provide additional comments to be included in that final report to the Federal Highway Administration. And at this time, I'd like to welcome the chairwoman of Thrive's Board of Trustees, Connie Vaughn, to close us out.
Thank you, Shannon, and what a great job you've done today on running the virtual forum. It's been flawless. Thank you for all your hard work. And Bridget, let me just say, one of the things that the Freight Forum today has pointed out to us is that absolutely it's important that we work together, and through conversation, connections with each other, and collaboration, we are a stronger region, and we can make the most of Freight Alley. And beautiful work from our presenters today. Thank you all. The slides and information was so helpful. I'm excited about the work that CDM Smith is doing. Thank you, Melissa and folks there, for doing a great job with the Economic Partnership grant. Dan and TDOT, thank you. We are so grateful to have your involvement in Thrive. We just absolutely could not do this without you. Let me just say thank you to my friend and co-worker Deborah Stone at McKee for leading the Freight Mobility Coalition, and beautiful job. Deborah knows everything there is to know about trucking and logistics in the Chattanooga region. She's the go-to person. So we're fortunate to have her leading this coalition. Mayor Coppinger, we are so grateful for your leadership and support to Thrive. It is your early investment and involvement. You've been a terrific champion of our work, and we appreciate that so much. And we know that your leadership and your partnership with us brings others along. And so we are thankful to have you participating with us today. And all of our partners, those that supported the virtual forum today, including Bridge Innovate, McKee, of course, and CDM Smith, thank you all. We just could not do this without your help. And yes, we need you. So join us. Come join us. Shannon's email is there. We are meeting virtually, and the Freight Coalition, we need your help. We need your input. You can see CDM Smith and Dan both called for your help and your thoughts, and we certainly want those. Let Shannon know if you can want to participate. And so Shannon, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you again, Bridget and the Thrive staff, for all that you're doing to help us around freight mobility. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. And as we leave you today, we want to leave you with a final message outlining Thrive's mission, our impact areas, and as we've discussed at length today, how together we all can thrive.
Nearly 10 years ago, this region didn't have an identity like it does today. Not only are we building an identity, but we're building a movement across this region of how we as residents, as workers, as students, how we thrive.
A regional focus truly encompasses the scale at which we live our lives. We as people don't live between margins and boundaries. We flow between places. We live, consume, and travel across state lines. It makes sense then that someone takes a holistic outlook that shapes our future.
Traditionally, we all have been looking at areas in silos, for example, mobility or energy. So what is important is actually to bring all of these together and look at it collectively and then see that, okay, what can be done?
We're so fortunate to live in a region that has an abundance of natural treasures that attract people from all over the world to come live and work in our community. Every region knows that you need good jobs in order to thrive. What makes our approach different is that we're also focused on the thing that makes our region unique, which is our natural treasures.
This region is poised to experience tremendous growth. We expect that in the next 50 years, the population is going to double. With that comes added pressure on our natural resources, on our transportation.
Thrive is the only organization thinking about our transportation infrastructure at the regional level, and that has to be solved at the regional level because of our three-state geography.
This region is Freight Alley. Freight impacts every aspect of our lives. It includes the trucks that you see on the road, the rail, and our river. Are we using the barge traffic as efficiently as we can? How we handle freight moving through this region, the decisions we make today impact our communities, the natural treasures. So how we collaborate at the state level and at the local level, to me, that's the most important thing that Thrive is doing today, is convening those groups.
Our region is full of proud communities that are just a wealth of history and culture and creativity. So we work with them to identify their distinctive assets and leverage those to create their own community and economic vibrancy. With them, we have built an inclusive network across 16 counties and 3 state lines to address the complexities of regional growth.
This approach allowed people to become engaged and allowed them to voice their opinion and concerns, and they began to feel like they were taking ownership of a process.
What Thrive allowed us to do was take the time to sit down with parts of my community that I didn't realize I was disconnected from. I think what we were expecting to hear was people wanting more amenities, but really what we heard was a desire for people to feel connected. And then we got to turn what we heard into actual experiences and experiments.
These are the people that are living in these regions. They understand their need, they understand their challenges, they understand their priorities, so they can help us to see that, okay, what we are working on is even valuable or not. So now we're making sure that we can hear everybody's voice through the data that has been collected.
I've worked many years in the conservation field across the country, and I've never seen a program like this. Thrive to me is, from a community perspective, taking a holistic, human-centric approach to sustainable development.
We do not take a top-down approach. That never works. People need to be a part of the change, and they need to be a part of steering that change in the direction that they wish for it to go.
I know that real change and sustainable progress takes time, and it only moves at the pace of relationships. I thought I knew my community, but I didn't really know my community. And Thrive was kind of that missing piece that connected all those dots.
Without Thrive, what's going to happen in the future is anybody's guess. With Thrive, we have the opportunity to work together to make sure that we develop in the right way, that services the economy, that services transportation, but protects the things that make people want to live here, which are the natural treasures.
Thrive's simple proposition is that growth isn't either or. We can have large-scale economic growth and charming, distinctive communities. We can optimize freight corridors and protect beautiful places for public health and recreation. As people, we don't live our lives in silos. And at Thrive, we believe the future shouldn't be planned in them. There is strength in looking at these complex questions holistically and collaboratively across geographic boundaries. With Thrive, partners rely upon each other's strengths and the best, most relevant information available. The quality of life of this region is more promising with this collaborative and optimistic approach.
We're excited to see where that wave ends up. It's going to spread throughout our whole community, and it's going to make a difference. And we will be alive again and thriving.